Welcome back, writers. Today we're talking about contractions. Words formed by condensing other words into a shorter form by omitting a letter and replacing it with an apostrophe. So could not becomes couldn't, do not becomes don't, they are becomes there, and so on. So the abridged version of today's tip is, contractions are good. We should all be using them. But the reason we're talking about contractions today is that not everyone has embraced the idea of using contractions in their writing. And that's understandable. It wasn't that long ago. Well, it was early in the last century, but not that long ago, that contractions were considered unacceptable in everyday writing. They were thought of as lazy or sloppy. But that thinking has long since changed. And today, contractions are very much acceptable, even encouraged in everyday writing. Still, some writers are hesitant to use them, and as a result, their writing can come across as stilted and even a little archaic. So this tip today is intended just to sway those writers who might still be clinging to outdated writing advice that contractions are good. Even the government supports using contractions. The United States Government Style Guide says, "Write as you talk to increase the ease with which your writing can be read and understood. One of the best methods for achieving this is through the use of contractions. People are accustomed to hearing contractions in spoken English, so using them in your writing can help them relate to your message." I mean, you may not always agree with the government, but that is good advice. Okay, so the case for using contractions is this. Contractions make your writing sound more natural, more engaging, more authentic, and more contemporary. That seems like something we would want to strive for in our writing, right? Natural, engaging, authentic. All right, so let's look at some sentences. Mary was shy and did not speak. I could not help but be enchanted by her sweet smile. Sounds a little stilted, right? But if we replace those words with contractions, Mary was shy and didn't speak. I couldn't help but be enchanted by her sweet smile. Sounds more natural, engaging, and authentic. Which one would sound better to your reader? Let's look at another one. You would make a great diplomat. You are good at telling truth to power. And if we use contractions, you'd make a great diplomat. You're good at telling truth to power. What do you think? Which is more natural? Which is going to sound better to your reader? And this one? She did not ask her son to wait because she did not want to be a burden. And with contractions, she didn't ask her son to wait because she didn't want to be a burden. Do contractions make the sentence better? Does it sound more authentic? More like the way you'd actually say it in conversation? And of course, there are occasions when we would intentionally not want to use contractions, especially in situations where we want to emphasize a certain point or just give it a little more oomph. We thought the changes would be met with universal approval, but they were not. Versus, we thought the changes would be met with universal approval, but they weren't. See how there's a little more punch or emphasis without the contractions? They were not. Or this one, the assembly has been canceled. Do not go to the auditorium. Repeat, do not go to the auditorium. And with contractions, the assembly has been canceled. Don't go to the auditorium. Repeat, don't go to the auditorium. It just loses some of that authority when we use contractions. It makes it a little less urgent, right? So think of contractions as the writing equivalent of your mom calling you to dinner. It's the difference between, Billy, dinner's ready, and William Thomas Christopher, get your butt down here. It's just a little more authority, a little more emphasis when you don't use contractions. So there are times when we want to use contractions and times when we intentionally don't want to use contractions, and hopefully you can see the difference so that you can choose which is preferable for the sentences you're composing. As writers, that's a sense we really need to develop. We need to be able to pick up on the nuance between do not and don't, between will not and won't. because whether or not we use contractions can mean the difference between achieving just the right tone that you're looking for and not achieving it at all. So bottom line, we want to feel comfortable using contractions in all of our documents. In the vast majority of cases, we're going to want to use contractions, and about 10% of the time, we won't want to use contractions. But we'll make those decisions on a case-by-case basis depending on the message we're crafting. So that's really all I have to say about contractions, but in the interest of giving you the full picture, I feel like I have to weigh in on this debate over formal versus informal writing and what that means as far as contractions are concerned. Some of you might be aware that in certain circles it's considered inappropriate to use contractions in formal writing. And if you do a search, you're likely to find rules like this. Formal writing is characterized by complex sentence structure, infrequent use of personal pronouns, and a complete lack of slang terms and contractions. Using contractions in formal writing is considered inappropriate by the academic elite. Do not use contractions in documents that serve a formal purpose, such as legal contracts, professional publications, and scholarly texts. So let's think about that. If, as we said earlier, the reason that we want to use contractions is because it makes our writing sound natural, engaging, authentic, and contemporary, then it stands to reason that not using contractions would make our writing sound unnatural, unengaging, pretentious, and archaic. That doesn't really sound like something we want to strive for in our writing, right? So my take on this debate is, I don't think there is formal writing and informal writing. I think there's only writing. Every sentence you construct should convey your thoughts in the exact tone and with the exact amount of emphasis or formality that you hear in your head when you're formulating your message. So instead of deciding that your document is formal or informal before you even put pen to paper, instead of deciding ahead of time that you are or you're not going to use contractions, like you've heard me say 1,000 times, make those decisions on a case-by-case basis according to the message that you're crafting, one sentence at a time. My guess is you'll end up using contractions more often than not because it sounds more natural, engaging, authentic, and contemporary. I agree with this science professor who said, whatever your views on the topic, we need to change how we teach science students to write. University science departments could learn a lot about effective writing from their counterparts in the humanities and communications. I think what Professor Smith meant by that is that even legal contracts, professional publications, and scholarly texts could benefit from a loosening of outdated writing rules. The academic elite could make their documents more readable, more accessible by allowing contractions and other previously frowned upon conventions. That's just my take on the subject. The only thing that really matters as you're constructing your own documents is what you think. You're the writer, and those choices are your responsibility. Okay, that's it for today. Next time we're going to talk about modifiers and how to tell whether they're helping your sentences or hurting them. I'll see you then.